morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Point Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 15, where we are still in the therapist's office listening to the interplay between Alan Arkin's father figure and John Cusack's assassin Martin Q. Blank. Joining us on today's show, we have David Forsyth. Welcome to the show, David.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
Doing all right.
Excellent. It's been great having you here all week with us.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Cool. So, Dev, your favourite film of all time. Here we are. Once again.
We're back again. So this is kind of almost the very end of this dialogue. We're going to have, I think, one more minute afterwards of in the therapist's office. But we've kind of been talking about how we've got Dr. Oatman as this father figure character, and we start to see that relationship build through this dialogue at this point. You know, there's been a lot of tension and a lot of antagonism back and forth, and now it's starting to become finally a productive therapy session. You know, Martin is starting to get some advice. He's starting to bring out the things that he really wants to talk about, and Oatman's finally somewhat receptive to hearing them.
Yeah, he's definitely sort of reluctant about it. Like the Cusack or Martin is sort of prompting his own treatment at points. He's like, "Tell me, come on, just ask me what you'd ask me, or what do you want to talk about next?" Right? Like he's doing that, and that's, you know, we've in the previous minute he sort of laid out all the reasons why he couldn't treat him. And here he kind of gets into that a little bit. And I think, you know, we talked about how this is sort of a proto Sopranos kind of relationship, and that show did a good job of doing the similar things over a much longer period of time, where like, we can't do this, but I want to keep doing it because it's interesting, or because it's fascinating, kind of thing. And, you know, like he's still putting up the wall. He's still being, like, no, I shouldn't be doing this. There's the point where I think he grabs a rosary in this minute or something like that, and starts kind of like thumbing through it. So like he's clearly still got objections going on, but like it's clear that it's more than just the intimidation that's keeping him talking here. So
have you guys seen the title of the green book that the doctor's got on his desk?
Adolescent psychiatry.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah.
There we go. That cements everything we're saying right there.
Yeah, I was trying to catch it last minute and I couldn't quite see it on screen clearly enough. And then just to see we're asking, it was focused on Oatman sat at the desk and I could just make it out.
Yeah, the wide shot when he's over Oatman's shoulder when he's leaning down over the rosary, and you can see Blank in, you know, slightly further left or right of center. Yeah, nice and clear down there. But that just cements everything, doesn't it? Right there. Although I do like the idea about I don't want to suggest anything that might be uncomfortable for you.
Yeah. Right. And that's the bit that I think we kind of touched on a little bit last time too, that it's the most obvious thing, right? Like, if you find out that there's a contract killer having emotional problems, you know, like it's the Occam's razor of therapy here for him, but he just rejects it like straight out of hand, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know we talked last time about, or 2 episodes ago, about PTSD and post combat, you know, attitudes to veterans and post combat stress and reactions and psychology. The other thing that strikes me here, and this may be because I teach in an all boys school, I don't know, but and it's also, I should say, a very heavily for the UK. It's a fairly military school as well. We still have 3 active cadet forces, all 3 active cadet forces, and a number of ex-military on staff. But that refusal to even begin to entertain the idea that the thing you're good at is the problem just strikes me as not just a military thing. That strikes me as a masculinity thing.
There's a lot of alpha male going on, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can't possibly be that, because
Yeah.
that's what I'm good at. How could that be the problem?
Yeah.
And he sort of lays it out as virtuous may not be the right term, but I think this is the minute where he says that, if I show up at your door, there's a reason, like you've done something for it. But like we've seen, like who he's going to be contracted to kill, and some of the other people, it's unclear as to, it doesn't seem like he's doing a lot of time spending time figuring out who he's going to kill. He takes the contract and he spends the time figuring out how he's going to kill them. Right? He's about his method, not about why. He's not some vigilante. He takes the contracts for people who want someone murdered. Right?
Unless it's a Greenpeace boat, he draws the line at dogs and Greenpeace.
Right. And dogs.
But you're right. You've got the first hit, right? The cyclist, which is, pretty relatable, right? You're protecting somebody else. That the cyclist was going to kill somebody else. It's quite an easy thing to pitch, regardless of how good the actual end target was. The character that Dan Aykroyd, Grosse takes out in the end. But in the second hit, it's a lot harder to justify, right? You're just trying to execute a guy in his sleep, and then when it goes sideways and he has to confront the guy is like, whatever it is, I'll stop doing it. And Martin Blanc has no qualms about what he's doing, or seemingly no qualms about what he's doing.
Right.
I guess this whole sequence kind of emphasizes that maybe that's not quite as clear cut. But you're right, it's a job and he's paid to do it, and so he does it. He doesn't really spend much time, I think, belaboring the consequences. It's just a mantra that he's had drilled into him, right? That
And I think right after he gives that explanation, doesn't he then just say, like, I don't even want to talk about morality, right? Like it's not a it's not a thing that concerns him. It's maybe it concerns him at some level, but that's not what he's there to talk about.
No. And in fact, that absence of morality, the amorality that he holds, is the reason he got this job in the first place, right? And we find that out later very, very explicitly.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting that we're talking about amorality, and we're talking about people who are trained to do something that is fundamentally very difficult for most humans to do, at least if it's not coming from a place of emotion. And I just this is something we brought up very early on in this cast, and I think it's going to be it's one of the themes that makes the film interesting for me, is this need for films, the romanticization of the hitman, and the need to make them humans in ways that don't eliminate the fact that their ability to do that job. And we've got all kinds of variations on it. The classic one is the one last job. I want out, one last job. We've also got the he's good at his job, therefore this is what he does. I mean, John Wick is borderline parody. I love it to bits, but it is borderline parody with the dog. It's like that. What else could you do at that point historically? There's no more plot lines left. It's got to be the dog. But I think, but I find it interesting that this comes out 3 years after Leon, aka in America the Professional. And one of the things about that film that I thought that made it so entertaining at the time was Besson was big, French comic book influence, so it's brutal, but there is still the line that's drawn in the sand is literally 4 words: no women, no kids. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, that's great. You've drawn a line in the sand for us, but even with that line, he's still far more, and this is what French films do, far more of an anti-hero, and far more on the cusp of the morality issue. than Blank. You know, Blank's joke about the Rainbow Warrior, the fact that he feels this is coming. You know, the way he talks as well. Just his, you know, Leon is quiet. He's almost silent for most of that film. Right, and Reno does so much with the face, and and while Cusack is equally good an actor, it's still very much, you know, as you say, the morality is, the limitations are on screen at least are clearly expressed, and yet I still wonder to this day, why are we so fascinated? You know, why are we so interested as audiences, and also why filmmakers are always so interested? I mean, was it Goddard who said, if you putting a gun in the hands of a woman is more interesting because a woman needs a reason to kill, you know, which is like his variation on the Chekhov's gun thing, you know.
Mm.
But with men, we always go, yeah, okay, well, yeah, they're going to do this, and I feel like Grosse Point Blank starts to dig at that a bit and dig around that a bit and start to get into that. You know, what
Yeah.
really is, why do we do that? Why do we go and get trained up to it? And why is that a thing that when we're boys, you know, it becomes aspirational?
Mm. I seem to remember reading a bit about um, how Cusack was sort of building his character for this, and he was looking at sort of the Reagan Bush era government officials who were, you know, planning war, planning coups, planning assassinations, and then just going about regular everyday life, going home to their families, going back to their jobs, and sitting down at a desk and signing papers and things like that, and um, you know,
Hmm.
having just normal life uh, amongst assassins, amongst killers,
Hmm.
um, which, you know, I don't know if that answers your question necessarily, but I was sort of thinking about that, and then,
Hmm.
you know, we have
Hmm.
a whole a whole genre, a shorthand for
Hmm.
Blank with a heart of gold, right? Like any
Yeah.
Hooker with a heart of gold, Hitman with a heart of gold, Thief with a heart of gold, kind of deal, kind of around, and but there is something particular about the Hitman that y- you know, it kind of brings a different sense of morality to it. Like he
Hmm.
kind of twists morality and says, most despicable thing you can do, but you know, if we twist the ends a little bit, there's
Hmm.
you can find that there is some form of normalcy, some sort of morality in them. Yeah,
I
I don't know
think
if I got anywhere with that, but
no, I that definitely helps,
yeah.
and in particular, your point about using the '80s as a touchstone for the character. You know, it goes to the heart of the idea of the fact that this is about people who do it as a paid job, right? I
Mm,
mean, you know, rewind to '60s and '70s, and we look at films with snipers in them, and usually the snipers are either uh, bad guys, you know, and they're doing it because they won't. You know, it's not they won't get in your face where it can be personal. You know, it's the
hmm,
depersonalized killing, and it's often the thing that the lone psycho does, right? I mean, there's the whole, you know, 4 assassinations in 6 years by lone people, and you know, at least one of them does it with this through sniping, and it's there's a sense of the person who trains and uses these things and then goes off and does it for themselves. It's not. There's a lack of honor there, right? The honor is in facing up face to face with with the good guy, you know.
mm,
Um, and that's changed now, and that's shifted now, and because he's a person who gets paid, and because it's a business, and because business is good, right? '80s
yeah,
business is good, greed is good,
yeah,
right? This is it's killing. Hey, you know, it's a business too, right? Bull, like the line in the script, it's a bull market. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's the thing. That's the thing that makes it makes this film's version of it just so interesting. You know,
yeah.
yeah, no, that has nailed it for me. That the idea of the '80s is, yeah, absolutely, and
Hmm.
of course, the punk origins are exactly the thing that would make him, as a scriptwriter and a producer, want to put that spin on it.
Yep.
There's an interesting sort of meta aspect about not Cusack the actor, but Cusack's previous characters, right? Like
Hmm.
he's got a lot of high school age misfit characters in his background. You get your Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer, sort of a pair of films that are essentially the same thing, just different sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a sort of semi-perverted misfit in 16 Candles, and Say Anything. He's this character that is going to live outside of society, and but whatever. You don't have any trouble seeing any of those characters getting to the point where they freak out,
Mm.
join the army, and then something weird happens to them. So those meta characters in Cusack's past kind of, you can follow the thread of them
Mm-hmm.
into Martin Q blank. What's the Q stand for? I don't know, but um
I don't.
but
Yeah, I don't think it's ever
yeah, I don't think it's ever
elaborated.
explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I sort of lost the thread of that one too, but it's yeah, it was just an
Yeah,
interesting
it's an
look at.
extreme outcome for any of those characters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not
Yeah.
maybe impossibly extreme, but
right,
still extreme.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the allusions to his parents in this film
yeah,
are quite reminiscent of the kind of home life that he would have had in a lot of those earlier films.
But this is the thing, isn't it? As I think you said in a previous episode, David. This is the and you mentioned at the start of this episode, Dave, this idea that we're looking at the first Gulf War and when and where that happens, and the fact that these happy-go-lucky films of the '80s, don't you don't realize, or you don't think when you watch them, that some of the characters will be the ones going to war.
yeah,
And actually this film is the other side of that now, and saying, hang on a minute, what happens to those characters? I mean, I think that's the point you're getting at, isn't it? What happens to
yeah.
these characters if they're the ones who ended up going to war? I mean, it's either this year or a couple of years later that we get Three Kings from David O.
Mm,
Mm,
Russell as well,
yeah,
which is absolutely superb film, and
yeah,
again feels very kind of Gen X-y, lots of humor, lots of conversation, discussions about, are we the heroes? Are we
mm,
not? What are we doing here? Kind of thing. Um, and a bit of a '70s vibe as well, in a kind of Iraq set, Kelly's Heroes. But that, yeah, this feels like these films all feel of a piece, of a moment. Finding a different way to look at another era's war, and a war that is distinctly different to those previous wars.
no,
yeah,
Um, but it's still a
it's
war.
yeah, it's kind of interesting how we've somewhat circled back on our earlier statement of this film feeling quite timeless, and this was from
Mm.
several episodes ago, and we were talking about how there's very little in this film that actually really dates it, but in the subtext, everything dates it. It
Well, yeah, except that what I'm starting to realize is how American films cope with individual wars cinematically,
yeah,
right? Because this isn't MASH, but you can kind of see
mm,
how we get MASH, we get Kelly's Heroes, we get, you know what I mean? We get
yes,
First Blood.
yeah,
oh, yeah,
First Blood we mentioned another time. You're
yep,
starting to see these different aspects of how Hollywood does different movies. I mean, and timelessness is an interesting thing. I mean, I last year I read because I hadn't read it before. I'd seen it before, but I read The Manchurian Candidate because I
mm,
teach Kennedy's assassination every year to year 9 over here, which is 13 to 14-year-olds,
yep,
and obviously, essential film, essential book, but to read a book like that is several years before that particular historical event, and get your head around the fact that people are going, yeah, this is perfectly plausible, perfectly possible,
yeah,
long before it actually happens in some, or at least a version of that aspect of those ideas
yeah,
manifests itself. Was mind blowing, and it's such and because it's a very traditional piece of pulp writing, it's incredibly short, incredibly sharp, bang, 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 bang. It doesn't feel dated, other than the phones and the devices and the occasional
hmm,
language. In the same way that Elmore Leonard, who was writing westerns back then, his style over the decades never really changes. He gets better and more refined, but again, that precision, that kind of, this is all I need to write. and you know what I'm talking about, and that's all you need to see, and this is all I need to have the character say. That the purity of American pulp right there is something that I think is coming through here as well, and it's that, as you say, it's both specific to the period, but also timeless in that sense. Um, I think I said in an early episode, I don't know if anyone would make this film now, and I wouldn't want to see it remade. But that idea of the person who comes back from war programmed in some way,
Mm-hmm.
that never goes away.
No, but I think
Yeah.
the way he is dealing with it
Yeah.
places the time, right?
Yeah.
The closest analogy to this film in a previous time period I can think of is really Deer Hunter.
Mm.
And in Deer Hunter, he attempts to deal with it. And that's another film where I don't even think there's all that many references to Vietnam specifically, right? A lot of the time he's out in the woodland. A lot of the time there's, it would be very hard to date the piece, except for the context in which he's dealing with it. And I feel like that's the same here. That the 70s way of addressing this was to go out and find yourself in a very, you
Mm.
know,
Iron Man,
American ruralist.
Iron John, sorry, was the culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Whereas here it's a case of sharing and,
Mm.
opening yourself up and unlocking those things, even though that's
Mm.
challenging. And we see him challenge, like struggling to achieve that. But that I think is a very 90s approach where it's like, if you follow these steps, if you do these things, everything will be fine.
Mm.
Um, and I think if you try and approach this again now, it would have a different outcome. It would be much more ambiguous. It would probably be quite serious, and not in a Deer Hunter way, but in a different way of a lot of ambiguity, a lot of gray in that purported resolution, and the realization that it ultimately there is no panacea. It's not actually going to be fixed. It just might be a little bit better than it was before.
Mm. I mean, and this brings us to the solution, or the potential solution in all of this, which is not just what is going home about, right? What is going back home about? I mean, there's two things I think. I mean, since we've gone deep, let's go deep, right? Two things I think are interesting about this. One is that idea that goes all the way back to Beowulf, the Odyssey. The warrior, having left society to go and do terrible things to defend that society, comes home and cannot be home. It's what John Ford manages to summarize in one shot at the end of The Searchers, right? But that's the kind of the point, right? The warrior is now outside the pale. He has done things that society will not accept a human doing. So there's a bit of that in here, which I'd only just realised from what you were saying, Dev, right? There's a little bit of that in there.
I mean, there is literally the line, "I can never go home again, Oatman, but I guess you can shop there."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. That's it right there. And
Yeah.
then there's the business of men and women, or men and a partner, and men of there's the emotional element, right? And whether
Yeah.
or not
The love of a good woman solves the
precisely
problems.
right,
Yeah.
and they're addressing that in an interesting way, and I think that's the fun when we get to it later on. I think that is the fun of their first interactions. Is it doesn't go like that at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, as you say, very 90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, anything else, folks, on this particular one?
I was going to say is sort of my last hurrah here on the show, and maybe one of your few guests who's actually been to Grosse Pointe, Michigan. I want to say that they did a really good job of capturing the spirit of it. I mean, I know we're not actually there in these minutes, but without capturing the look of it, I would say, like, it when you see it, you're like, that's not Grosse Pointe, but they did a good job of capturing the spirit of it. And I just want to bring up again how like a radio station, like hyper local, staffed by like one or two people, is just such a, for me it's like a particular fantasy, because I love radio, and I love people who take adventure in radio, and I would love to have like a storefront radio shop down the street from me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so if somebody could make that happen, that'd be great. But that's all. That's my main.
Have you considered traveling to Sicily, Alaska, by any chance?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been get my FCC license for a micro tower, and yeah, maybe I'll become the town's counselor or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That would definitely be more fun than being the midnight caller. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a good show, but man, he got into trouble all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, David. Well, let's hope somebody out there can make your dream come true for us. So, thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, and other creatures whatsoever. All of us out there, the weirdos, the mad ones, the crazy people. This was minute 15 of the Grosse Point Blank podcast, Debi Radio, 79.5 FM, featuring co-hosts, co-writers, co-producers, Dev Suthergar and Hugh David.
Today's guest and this week's guest was David Forsyth. David, one last time, where can we find you?
If you go to moviesbyminutes.com, and that's with 2 S's, so it'll be nice and sibilant in the microphone for you. Moviesbyminutes.com, you'll find a whole slew of other Movies by Minutes podcasts like this one, like mine, Edge of Tomorrow Minute. And they're mostly great. Not all of them. You know who you are, turning in a subpar podcast, but I'm sure this one will be great.
Thank you so much. You can find us on all good podcast players, presumably like the one you're listening to this on, as well as YouTube, X, aka Twitter. See what I did there? I reversed them this time. Yeah, I'm moving with the times, people. And Spotify at Debi Radio, on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio.
And if you do want to talk with us, you can find us at the Facebook listener group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time.